Hello there, and welcome to episode number 87 for the National Land Realty Podcast, where we discuss all things land. Our goal here is to inform, educate, and entertain those of you who own land or are interested in the buying and selling of land throughout the United States. My name is Mac Christian, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at National Land Realty. I'll be your host for this episode. Now, today, we're here to talk turkey. It's a very good topic because turkey season is opening nationwide in the next week and a half, and all of you will probably be sitting in camouflage under trees making noise. And it's this is a pastime that goes on throughout the country. There's a lot of passion for this animal. And the one thing that has been noticed over the last few years is there are declining populations in several places throughout the United States. Now, there's numerous organizations that have made it their mission to help this animal throughout the United States, and we are here today to talk to one of them. And this is one that you should know about, Turkeys for Tomorrow. And we're talking to Jason Lupardus, who is the Director of Business Operations and Partnerships for Turkeys for Tomorrow. And he's here today to talk about what this organization does, what's going on in turkey conservation, what's going on in turkey populations, and most importantly, how you can help participate and help organizations like his preserve this animal that we all love so much. Now, sit back and enjoy. All right, so I am sitting here with Jason Lupardus, and Jason, you are the Director of Business Operations for Turkeys for Tomorrow. And before we kind of dive into what Turkeys for Tomorrow is, I kind of want to just, how did you get to Turkeys for Tomorrow, and sort of what is your pathway to conservation?
Man, I mean, how much time do we have? Because this is a story, right?
You have to crack a bottle here and go get a glass of bourbon and go through the length of time.
Listen, man, I mean, I'm trying not to do bourbon today, just a little water, but I will in a bit. So, yes, I am a bourbon enthusiast, by the way. I live in Kentucky. I mean, if you don't drink bourbon, I mean, it's bad, right? They'll run you out of the state. But no, brother, I'm originally from Alabama. I grew up in rural Alabama, North Alabama, and really just got exposure at a young age to the outdoors. I mean, you're outdoors every day doing things, and got lost in life, so to speak. Thought I was going to go to school to be an engineer. Went 3 years into chemical engineering, and then had an awakening. And Lord have mercy, it was a good awakening. And I figured that I needed to do something outdoors. And so that landed me at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, East Tennessee. Yeah, I still sing Rocky Top, not very good. And we still bleed a lot of orange. But man, we got over there, and I got into the wildlife program there, and man, just fell in love with it. It was just like natural. And so it's one of those things, man, when you find your place in life and you know you're there, it's like everything comes easy. Now I had to work hard, but man, everything was just so much easier to me to be there. So yeah, got to Knoxville, did my undergraduate degree there, got my bachelor's degree, really in wildlife focus with a minor in forestry. And then I had an opportunity as I was going to school and doing a lot of side projects. Like I lived up in Cades Cove, up in the mountains, trapping bears, man. So I've trapped a little over 100 black bears, and just a lot of hands-on experience doing crazy cool stuff. Volunteering on an elk project, which I actually stepped in and had a major professor that said, "Hey, if you help me write a grant, you're in." And I said, "I'm in." And so no kidding, like the first grant that I ever got to put in for, which is the hardest one to get, is a science grant. And so we put in, got a ton of money, and literally I did my master's thesis on the elk reintroduction up in East Tennessee mountains in the Cumberlands. And so yeah, man, it was fantastic. And then from there, come out of school, had a job offer immediately down in Georgia. Went to work for Georgia DNR as a private lands wildlife biologist, and then really coordinate efforts across the southern half of the state, working with, I think I calculated, I met with over 1,000 landowners, man. I mean, and had a really heavy emphasis on conservation easements, working with real estate there. And so it was fantastic, man. I mean, every day I love my job. And then somehow I got picked up by the National Wild Turkey Federation. This is a long story. I'm trying to make it quick.
No, you're all good.
And literally, man, from there, I moved in as a biologist. We're trying to get closer to home, and where all of our family was. So moved up to Kentucky, landed here, worked for the NWTF for about a decade, man. Had a great run, and then jumped on to the Union Sportsman, working with Union Labor for a little over a year as chief operating officer there. And then I saw this organization, TFT, emerging. I mean, I'm just like a passionate conservationist. I love turkeys. I love turkey hunting. And I'm known to chase spring. Okay. And so when I saw them coming around and a few years young, and I just reached out and said, "Hey, do y'all need any help?" And literally was like, "Well, yeah, we could use some help." And so that led me to going to sit down with their board of directors and really making them a pitch. And they invited me in. And so I joined a new quote unquote flock, as they call it. And yeah, man, I've been on here for about 7 months ish, and just trying to really help stand this organization up and drive the conservation efforts at a much larger arena.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit. So you work for Turkeys for Tomorrow as a conservation group, and there's a lot out there, right? Like there's a lot of groups out there that work on various levels. There's statewide organizations that work with policy. There are national organizations that work with state chapters. There's a lot of them, like you see a lot with like Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and stuff like that, that will work with both private land and public land, or some of them focus on particularly public land only. And so tell me just a little bit, how does Turkeys for Tomorrow work? What is its role with turkey populations and turkey conservation?
Brother, okay, that's a whole lot to unpack. So
New
I'm
bottle of
glad you're
bourbon.
sitting.
New bottle of
Yeah,
bourbon.
yeah. Are we bringing out Weller now or what? Come on. So it is time. Let's start here, man. So Turkeys for Tomorrow, we're 3 years young overall, and some guys and gals got together a few years ago. As of this month, this is the 3-year true anniversary for this 501c3 nonprofit, and focused on turkey decline. Turkey decline was really highlighted around 2012. I remember sitting in a wild turkey working group meeting down in Louisiana, one of the first times it really was brought up. And then all of a sudden, there were people just trying to drive efforts from then. And so TFT said, "Hey, this is becoming a big issue, and we don't feel like anyone's really addressing it." And so these guys and gals come together and they push really hard to do research projects. And so within the first year, they had 5 different research projects that they were funding. And we're talking about, a few guys that was on a board, and really no one was getting paid. It was just, we want to make a difference. And what we saw from the first year until now is people started knocking on the door. We started getting phone calls. People are like, "Yeah, I'm not hearing turkeys here either. Man, my turkey numbers are not as good." In some places, you still do see some bird numbers that are very stable, but not everywhere. And so we have what I call isolated decline across the United States. If we look at the regression curve for any turkey population, it's literally it's heading down. It's not good. We don't know what it is. There's some theory or thought that maybe we just haven't come off of the high from when birds got restored and it's balanced yet. There's some theory in a few states that maybe it's balanced and it's just circulating up and down, but numbers don't lie. So if you look at regression curves for almost every state, it's still showing decline. And me being a biologist, man, that bothers me. And so this is why I wanted to put my passion and my love and really my blood, sweat, and tears into this thing. Like, how do we turn this back? How do we go out and hear a lot of birds again and just enjoy the spring that makes it really special for folks like me, and taking friends and family out to experience that? It's nothing like it in my book. So Turkeys for Tomorrow stepped in, started rattling the cages. And really now we have people going, "Well, hey, we want to be members." And initially they're like, "Well, we didn't form to be a membership organization. We just formed to solve this problem." But we basically dictated what the grassroots efforts wanted. And so we just listened. And so our grassroots folks said, "Hey, we want to be members. Can we start like a chapter or get a group of us together?" And we're like, "Well, sure, we can do that." And so that evolved from just a handful of people doing things the first year to the second year membership starting to form. And then now we're up to about 22 formalized chapters in 13 states, primarily in the Southeast and Northeast. But if I showed you my waiting list of people we're following up with, it's mind blowing. We have about 80, a little over 80 requests at the moment. We picked up 25 last week. Okay, where we're funneling through and seeing where chapters want to form. We just formed another chapter in South Carolina. I know where y'all are based out of. So we now have 3 official chapters in South Carolina. And man, it's amazing. It's a very exciting time for us. And we're going at it. We just finished our first 3 events of this year. We had 2 in Alabama and 1 in West Tennessee. And so I'm still a little bit groggy, but I'm here. A lot of fun, and we had just a massive amount of people turn out. Like, we packed out the house every night. So we know that people care, and they want to try to do something to give back, for sure.
So if I'm, hearing the story of Turkey for Tomorrow, you basically started out as sort of a research organization where you're doing a lot of field research, and then based off of a request and need, developed into sort of what you see out of more traditional conservation groups where there are chapters actively going out. What kind of, when your groups are going out, of the 22 groups that you have now are engaging with the public, what sort of is the process for that? What is their primary, like, besides the research, these volunteer groups, how are they working with either public lands or landowners, or like what's sort of your process, and then what's your sort of target range of things that you work with?
Sure, man. This is the fun side of this, because what we're trying to do is we're listening, and listening is so important at this stage of the game to determine what do our members want this organization to be, because we're a member organization and our members are going to guide us in the correct direction. And so I refer to all of our members, which is just basically a bunch of like hardcore turkey hunters, turkey enthusiasts, and they're really the citizen science. They're the front lines of defense. They know what's going on in their property. If I ask you what's going on in your backyard, you're going to know better than me. And so we're taking that approach to develop this. And what we heard overwhelmingly is, number one, the biggest thing everyone said is, hey, we're not hearing turkeys like we used to. What can we do to help? We want to invest in you. We're still doing research. We're still investing in projects. We're putting money out there. We're also investing in awareness, such as the Wild Turkey Science podcast, where we basically are putting the science back out on a weekly basis so that everyone can hear that, understand it, and have some ideas of what they can do in their own backyard. But these local chapters that have formed these members, what we've worked on behind the scenes is really a big mission statement. And it's trying to work in these private landowner wild turkey cooperatives. And the whole function of that is to try to bring people together locally so that they better understand what's going on with your neighbor, et cetera. And that, and you kind of, some people are like, why is this so important? Why are you concerned about what 5 different landowners are doing in a small area? Well, let me put some science behind this to make this a little bit more digestible. But a wild turkey, their average home range in the eastern U.S., western U.S. is a little bit bigger. Eastern U.S., it's anywhere from 1 square mile to 2 square miles. So we're looking at 640 acres to up to almost 1,300 acres where these birds are moving around. Now we look at the average landowner size in the urban, suburban, rural landscape. And depending on what state you're in and where you are, it may be 25 acres, it could be 50 acres, et cetera. So you look at a map and you go, whoa, that's quite a few people that's on this landscape where this bird's moving around. Now let's look at this from, okay, you got this 2 or 3 gobblers that's roosting on 7 to 8 sites in their home range. How many landowners are they seeing? It could be 7, 8, 10, 12. And now let's go to a state that has a 1 bird harvest. And this bird's on 12 different properties. Now I want you to think about this logistically. So we got 3 birds, imaginary flock, 3 birds hitting 8 different roost sites on 12 different properties. And it's a 1 bird limit per landowner. What could happen there in that scenario?
Flock's gone.
Tells me, yeah, it could be bad, right? And so somebody may not get a turkey, but we could also kill out an entire cohort of birds and have something called additive mortality. So number one, these private landowner cooperatives is a means to get people together to better understand how we best manage birds at a local level. Number two, how do we best manage birds and improve habitat quality and what you're doing by looking at that at a scale? And so One guy may just have some ag and go, man, I have zero nesting habitat and good roosting cover. Okay, good to know. Well, your neighbor might be really cranking out a lot of good nesting habitat or brood range that could really be beneficial. So if you get everybody on the same page with a what I'd say a larger scale habitat plan, doing basic things, maybe we need to thin some timber out. If we address that foundational item, then your bird numbers, where you may only have 3 birds using those areas, now that may equate to 10 to 12 birds. Okay. And so, number one, we get some habitat and gear, we're in good shape. So, here's the third thing on that kind of scale. Maybe after we've got good habitat in place, or if we're in an area where we can't do as much habitat work, maybe we have some landowners who are just doing leases. Something they still could do, a very good practice, something to keep folks outdoors throughout the year. Maybe they want to do a little bit of trapping. We do know that a lot of our quote unquote predator numbers are higher than they ever been, especially mesopredators. We do know we're having some areas across the U.S. we're seeing nest success well below the threshold needed to really stabilize or keep a stable population, and it's helping with the decline factor. And so, if we know if we can trap effectively 2 to 3 weeks out of the year before nest initiation, we can really start turning back the numbers. Well proven with waterfowl, well proven with bobwhite quail. Bobwhite quail is most closely related to turkeys as far as what they need, what they have to do, et cetera. But in the quail arena, we've seen a 10 to 15% bump in a population in 1 year just by doing the correct type of trapping. Okay. So those are 3 big areas that we're focused on. And we know that private landowners are the key to the land mass here in the eastern U.S. I think it's like 85% or more of the eastern U.S. is privately owned, including industrial privately owned. And so if we're just trying to grow turkeys on public land, we are not going to make it at all. And so we have to be working with private landowners, and that's something we're doing that a lot of other folks may not want to do, but we're going to do that. And I think we can really create what I'd call our incubators, or areas where we have a higher population of birds, where it's going to end up being big source populations to help distribute throughout that larger range. So by doing that, we're really hitting on a lot of high marks.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the land distribution right before you jumped on that, as far as private land versus public land, because yeah, I live in the West Coast, and when you look at the distribution of public versus private land, it's like 2 different countries. You like when you go west of the Mississippi, you start getting into 60-70% public land, and a lot of it, like I live in Idaho, you can't exactly grow a crop on a cliff face, right? So it makes sense. But then when you start getting to the east, you have, like you said, 80% private land, and we discuss it all the time with deer management plans. Like we talk a lot of whitetail here just because, it's another game animal. And the one thing that you hear, it doesn't matter where you go, that no matter what plan you have, that plan's great, but what's your neighbor doing? And how's your neighbor managing? Like you might have set up a terrific habitat for whitetail to come in there, and you've got a great setup to pull in big bucks and get a good ratio of doe to buck. But then if your neighbor's shooting everything with antlers, then it's not going to do you any good to have a management plan. So getting people on the same page, you can build a population in your area depending on, like you're talking turkeys, right, with a 1 to 2 mile range. Everybody has to be on board, or else someone's taking home all the spoils and nobody else is, and then the population declines. And so tell me a little bit about how you sort of have been getting landowners together, and are there any projects that you have ongoing right now that you can discuss?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot here. So number one, I mean, we're initiating what I say this year is, as we're rolling this campaign out to get people thinking about it. We're trying to get people to think about turkeys year round. And so the first step to that is really awareness and to educate. And so we're rolling out the year of the hen. And so it's a means for everyone to be thinking about turkeys year round. 'Cause I'm gonna be honest with you, man. I'm married. I'll show my big ring. I mean, and I'm gonna tell you right now, happy wife, happy life, and that's how this works. And if you don't believe me, then apparently you've been married very long, or you got busted up because you don't have a happy wife. Okay,
Or you've got some things coming at you.
that's that's exactly right. But all fun aside, I mean, these hens are the ones that are really doing the work throughout the year to grow these poults up, bring them, they're getting imprinted on, and really taken to the places to help them survive. And so we want to focus on the bird year round. It's just not, hey, it's almost spring turkey season where someone gets to go out and hunt, shoot them. And don't get me wrong, I love to chase turkeys. Okay, I love to hunt. I chase spring. I mean, I'll hunt in multiple states. I may not harvest many birds. I'm not saying I'm a good turkey hunter, but I like to turkey hunt. Okay, but we have to think about how do we manage these birds year round. And I think the emphasis needs to be on the hens and what we're doing to make sure that they're able to sit on that nest, they're able to get their poults raised up and everything going on. So this is a part of this awareness campaign with our local chapters as well, to start talking to landowners and going, hey, and people in that local chapter like, look, this is what we're going to do. I'll give an example. The other night, I was in Jackson, Tennessee at our event there, our Two Rivers event, and literally, man, I'm talking to most of the people there. I mean, one-on-one conversations, a bunch of private landowners, and they're like, hey, what do we do? Can you come meet with us? And I'm like, hey, what we're trying to stimulate are these field days, local field days, where we start talking about doing this. And so we gain interest, we develop a field day, and we roll it out. We're going to try to do a really big field day down in South Georgia at Real Tree Farms, actually, where we'll be down there and bringing private landowners in to discuss, the issues. How do we work together? How do we form these cooperatives? And then what do we need to do to initiate those next steps? And so these are what I'd call the very first steps of something very larger coming for us. And that's how we're going to do that, along with continuing to support our research efforts with many of the universities in several areas, including one that we haven't really put out to the general public in a big way yet, but we are going to be working over in Arkansas with Five Oaks Ag. And I tell you what, great people over there, George, Jody Pagan, Daniel Duke, the whole crew over there. I mean, fantastic individuals. And that place is, you see it and you're like, man, it's a waterfowl mecca. But what we saw, or what we found in the last 6 months as we've been having conversations is, birds like to use bottling hardwoods for a lot of reasons. There's a ton of birds that use bottling hardwoods, including white-tailed deer and others. And what we saw is that across not only Arkansas, but Louisiana and Mississippi, is that there's a lot of private landowners that's enrolled in a program called Wetlands Reserve Program, or the Wetlands Reserve Enhancement Program. And in looking at that, that's almost 750,000 acres alone, just in those states, not counting their adjacent acreages that's not in this program. But what we saw is there's a need to do some management there, because they look like most of the properties in that program, they're in an age class of around 18, 19 years old to 23-ish years old. And it's really at the peak time where you need to do something with hardwoods. And so basically what happened is those programs were developed to really control dirt and control hydrology to save the land. And so very good job. Well done. But now it's like a next step. What do we do? And so now it's almost like a biological desert, kind of like a dense pine stand, but now it's a dense hardwood forest. Mixed hardwoods are all the same species, and we got to do something. And so what we're seeing is, if I was to tell you or ask, our audience and others, what's the number one place from a habitat standpoint where we've seen the biggest decline in birds, what would that be? And the guess is bottomland hardwoods.
Okay.
So,
and that's due to the fact that the hardwoods were planted to help maintain soil, but at a certain age, trees start blocking all the light. Your crown spacing closes in, and you get that dead zone where you don't get foliage, you don't get the growth, the undergrowth that you need to support both plant populations and animal populations, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So you have some of these younger stands, but you also have older stands, because a lot of folks, and I don't know if it's just the mentality of hardwood forest, or because, we see such hydrology come into these areas where you have water at certain times of year, then it's gone. And so a lot of folks are like, I just don't want to do anything there. We're just going to only work on our upland areas. And so there's a huge, huge opportunity to get in there and do some selective thinning. And for us, we're calling it thinning for turkeys. I mean, it's that simple. TFT, thinning for turkeys. And so we're trying to get some thinning going on in these bottomland stands and really drive a large scale project that's going to look at how do we best manipulate these bottleland hardwood stands, these young stands, because they're at that time where they can see their peak growth. So a lot of people may not understand this. Here's a little gee whiz science for you, okay? But pine stands, man, they grow from the get go. They go real fast, and then they kind of slow down, and then you can thin them, and you get growth again. Hardwood stands are different. They're kind of down, and they get kind of a slow growth. And at this age class, this is the time you have to do something, or you'll basically stagnate your stand where you don't get accelerated growth. But for the next 20, 25 years, if you thin these stands, you get accelerated growth. And so it's a key time to do that. So it's good for forest health. It's good for lumber value down the road. It's good to produce more mass, and it's good to have some sunlight hitting the ground. So it's like win, 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 and win. Why would we not do that? And I think a lot of folks just don't know that it's that important to do it. So we're trying to drive a campaign around that as well to get more work done on the ground with private landowners, to give them incentives to do things. And so we're hoping to have some influence at the very highest level with how Farm Bill rolls out, and how Natural Resource Conservation Service handles these in all the states, especially the Southeast.
Tell me a little bit about, because you've talked to it a couple times, like you're a turkey hunter and you work in conservation and you're working with private landowners who, in a lot of these cases are going to be turkey hunters. It's a huge case of the hunter's paradox, right? Where you have someone who hunts an animal but also wants to conserve it. You have lovers, and like people love the animals that they pursue. How does that play out when you're working with conservation? Do you work mostly with hunters and outdoorsmen, or is it more conservation mindset, non-hunting crowds that you work with?
I'm going to be honest with you, man. The hunter is the original conservationist. I mean, let's talk Teddy Roosevelt if you want to. We can go into the depths here, but the guys that hunt, that are out there on the properties, on land every day, they are the most dedicated and passionate people about the land. And I'm one of them. And so, even though I'm a turkey hunter, I'm a conservationist ultimately. Hunters are conservationists. And so, a lot of people don't understand that, but that's the fact. I mean, the hunters are the folks that really push the whole conservation movement. There's a lot of people that want to be on the other side of this coin that say we're more of a preservationist, where they want to have a hands-off approach and not do anything. I mean, that's great, I guess, but the reality is people are part of these systems now. And so we've had so much influence on the landscape that if we all of a sudden decide to just step back off of it, we're going to have to remove ourselves completely. And that's just not a reality. Okay. And so hunters are conservationists. And so our number one people we're working with are turkey hunters. Our turkey hunters, they're willing to give up things in order to have turkeys down the road. They're willing to give up, like, hey, I know I got 3 birds in this state I can harvest, but I harvest one because I care. I'm willing to go and do more property management to make sure there's more down the road for my friends, family, kids, and future generations. I mean, that's the kind of passionate people you're working with. And I'll be honest with you, they understand it too. And so they're willing to go the extra mile. I listened to some guys in South Carolina. South Carolina's got a big decline going on. And we had one of our guys show up over there right in y'all's backyard for your headquarters. And this guy's like, we're willing to pay extra money. We're willing to change the season, whatever we have to do to grow the population back to what it once was. Because we do not want to have a silent spring. And I will not let us have a silent spring, man. I mean, I'm ready to charge the hill for everyone, and we all are. And so we'll work with anyone, but our core group of folks are turkey hunters, and they're the ones that are asking us to do something. So it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure it's always good to hear somebody's perspective on that. Like, everybody has a different perspective, but I think most of the outdoors crowd that does hunt understands the paradox, but it's always good to explain for those that might maybe listening that are outside of that realm is that people who engage in hunting, like myself, I can speak to, like, we typically know more about the animal than what's good for us. We spend more time researching this animal or animals that we pursue, and it's like I can tell you when they sleep, what they like to eat, how they go, what their habitat looks like, and like I said, it's good to hear perspective on that. And when you're talking about private land ownership, you are going to be talking about turkey hunters in those areas, and unless they get on board, there's not much we can do. And that's and tell me a little bit, like, it's a unique perspective, right? The way that Turkeys for Tomorrow is approaching this by working with these collaboratives. It's not something you see from a lot of the 501c3s that work with animals, right?
Yeah, correct, man. I mean, you see a lot of folks that want to just say, hey, we're only going to do work on public ground because that's where anyone can go. And the money's going somewhere where anyone could use it. And I completely understand that. But I'll be really honest with you. Some of this mindset, I spoke with Brian Murphy that he was the OG of Quality Deer Management Association, right? It's now NDA. He's no longer with them. He's working for, I think, Hunt Stand and doing some other work with GON. And so, and I talked with him about some of this because they were really the ones that helped change the culture of deer hunting. And it's pretty amazing what they were able to do to get people thinking about, maybe we shouldn't harvest as many does, or, hey, maybe we do need to harvest more does. And we need to look at, buck to doe ratios. And if we let them go another year, oh man, we have a fantastic hunt. And then the biggest thing he did was these cooperatives. And I thought that was fantastic. How do we bring people together across the lines to really work on these things at a larger scale? And so when I talked to him about some of this stuff, he's like, man, he said, I think y'all are spot on. Someone needs to do that. I'm like, yeah, we're going to do it. And so we're trying to change the mindset and the culture of turkey hunting. And it's not going to be easy. And we're just, on the tip of the iceberg of it. It's not like it's been going on for years and years and years. I mean, there are actually state agency programs now for deer, like DMAP and others, that is specifically set up so you can best manage your deer herd and how many deer you harvest and aging them out and all this stuff. And I see the same thing for turkeys. I mean, it's pretty simple. When we're looking at habitat, we're looking at how we manage them and all the other things. And that's how we're going to make a difference. And if we don't do it now, who's going to do it, right? If not now, then when? So it's time to do something. And, the other big thing, I'm going to be honest with you. We're supporting research. But if you tell me, hey, man, we'll know the answer in 10 years of the research. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. We're going to take some common sense approach right now and do what we know and keep moving things along, because if it takes 10 years to find out an answer, it may be too late. The interesting thing about turkey dynamics, man, a lot of people don't know this either. This is just some common sense, but we're already kind of behind on turkey management when we look at populations. And I say this because state agencies are looking at harvest trends. So bird numbers are up or down with harvest. No one knows what the population estimate is. It's a wild guess. Every state agency, most state agencies have different algorithms on how to count how many birds there are. And so we don't even really know nationwide how many there are. It's a guess. It's an estimate. Okay. So for really managing populations, it's hard to manage if you don't even know what the baseline is. It's a guesstimate, right? So trying to figure that out is important.
If you're going off of harvest reports too, you're going off of how things were a couple of years ago, and you're not
exactly
finding out where you're at. You could have a great year, but that just means you had a great year like 3 years ago, and so you don't know where the population is now. Or I'm just trying to think.
So you just stepped into the perfect spot for me. Thank you. So with turkeys, I love it. I love it when people answer the question for me.
Didn't even plan it out.
I know. This is great. So what's really cool with this is, most of your harvest for turkeys is 2+ year old birds. Okay. So it's 2 years later before we know what happened 2 years prior to that population, because in most states, you're going to see 40 to maybe 55% of the birds harvested are 2 year olds. It's kind of those young teenage boys. You can think back, all you fellas can think back when hormones first hit, you get real stupid. You talk a little bit more, you show off a little bit more. And that's what turkeys do. They get really loud mouth. It's usually some of the best hunts you have is with 2-year-old birds. They like to gobble a whole lot. They like to strut a whole lot, and they succumb to some sweet calling a whole lot more. And so with that harvest, now we're already 2, maybe 3 years behind on what happened that year. So now we're having to look backwards and go, well, what happened? And how can we address that? But you're already too late. And so that's a challenge with turkeys and turkey hunting, is that we're having to look backwards because of how harvest is. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but it makes it a bigger challenge. And so if we don't start thinking ahead, going, you know what, we may be having issues. And the way that we're supposed to get around that is looking at poult to hen ratios. So the state agencies most still collect poult to hen ratios each year. And usually those numbers are really looked at hard in August, once those birds are big enough to be seen. Because those little poults that may be down in cover, you just won't see them. You go, oh, there's one hen in July. Well, come August, once they get some size to them, you're like, oh, we have one hen to so many. And then by that time, we have a pretty good feeling of how many of those birds are really recruited into the adult population. Okay. Those are all important factors. And so that's some of it what we're trying to look at on the front side. But if that doesn't correlate well to what harvest is, then you got some bigger questions to answer.
So as far as population decline, we talked to Dr. Michael Chamberlain out of the University of Georgia, and he's conducted field research throughout Arkansas, Georgia, and talking about turkey population decline. Let's dive in there a little bit as far as what we've seen that has changed turkey populations. And he spoke almost, it's like y'all took notes off of each other. That there are several things that contribute to it. One of them being, and you spoke to trapping, where a lot of the conservation plans that have been going out for the last, we'll say 50 years, have been focused on predator management and predator populations and protection of those, because a lot of those were stressed out in the early 1900s. And now that we've conserved a lot of the predator populations, now it's having an effect down the food chain, right? Where you have an abundance of predators and it's affecting the food chain. You also have habitat loss, just more people, less habitat, that sort of thing. More people need more food too, so then there's habitat change. What all are we looking at? Like environmental factors, or all the above, which is I'm kind of guessing where we're headed, but I want to kind of get into specifics.
It's tough, man. I mean, turkeys die by 1,000 cuts, right? And there's a lot of things that kills them, including myself. Okay, I'm one of those. I'm one of those guys that likes to harvest turkey, and I love to eat them, and so that's a part of it. But yes, one is predator numbers, and I could go into like a master thesis on some thoughts there on how our population got to be where it was, and looking at what happens when predator numbers shift and change, and what that means. I think that's a big one. Habitat, no doubt, fragmentation. When properties get fragmented, you basically have more edge habitat. Edge habitat is known everywhere. Great for deer, but it's also great for mesopredators, and it introduces more predators into a lot of other areas that were larger, more blocky, and much more well protected for birds that are at a scale. And so now with that, you have issues there. Third, I'm going to just say it. There's some diseases that, I think we have some very isolated areas where disease has impacts, and that's going to be forever and ongoing. Number 4, we have a whole lot more piles of feed being put in one location. Okay. And so than ever before, we have a lot of states that have basically open baiting for deer, and it has impacts on, and what we've learned just really recently is sometimes half the corn in that corn feeder is being eaten by raccoons and other critters. Okay. So what does that mean for raccoon populations? Raccoon populations around those feeders, if we draw a big circle, they're through the roof. And so they're very impactful on all ground nesting songbirds, not just turkey, quail, you name it. There's a ton of other even listed species that they could be impacted on. And so that scares me, man. Nothing against anyone wanting to put their feed out, but if you're wanting to put feed out and really help, let's take the correct kind of feed and put it into cover rather than just dump it in the feeder and saying, hey, I got to feed my critters, right? And so that's part of it. And then also there are some types of feed, such as corn, that we know produces aflatoxins. And so you look here in the East, there's been a couple of different research. There's like 3 research studies done. One was in Georgia, one was in Mississippi, and one was in Arkansas. The one in Georgia showed some pretty bad impacts on critters. We know in the past aflatoxins were first found in waterfowl around flooded cornfields, finding thousands of dead birds. And so we know that moldy corn can produce something called aspergillus and really cause some issues. And so you start adding all these things together. Now we're having a problem. And then the last one, man, I'm going to be honest with you. And this is some really new research that even Mike talked about recently too, but we have something called additive mortality. And so as a hunter, that scares me. And it's something a lot of people don't want to talk about. There's 2 types of mortality. One is compensatory mortality, which basically means that the critters in that population, we expect so many of them to die naturally of disease from other species, et cetera. And so our part of our calculation on what we can harvest is that we're harvesting that really surplus of animals that you typically wouldn't see being taken out naturally, okay? Additive mortality is meaning that all these critters are dying naturally, and then we're adding on additional mortality on top of that. And so if you hit that tipping point threshold where that population now is not on the growing scale, it starts declining, that could be an issue. And so we have seen some recent research come out that shows we may be having some additive mortality. Does that mean we need to shut down hunting as a whole? No, not at all. But we need to take a hard look at is how do we better regulate that and then work on boosting those populations back so that we can have, once again, states where we're very comfortable harvesting birds in.
Yeah, and
it's complicated.
Right. So it's the balance point on how hunting plays a role into animal management, where if you don't have a true assessment as to what the population's doing, then you might accidentally tip the balance when you're trying to manage. Is that
correct?
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and here's the crazy thing, man. And I'm not, I'm a guy. If they tell me I could kill 10 birds in my home state, man, I'm going to keep hunting because I love to turkey hunt, right? I mean, that's just me, and that's most hunters. If we think the population's good, but it's an interesting study, and I'm going to speak on Mike again. Mike's done some great studies. One of the studies he did is he had actually hunters tagged, GPS, and then also gobblers tagged. And it's pretty cool to watch the interactions. You watch some come in and die. You watch some get bumped. But the interesting thing is a lot of those birds that get bumped, and I say get bumped, they have an interaction one-on-one with a person. They see the individual, and then some of them completely left their home range. So what does that mean? So a bird that completely leaves their home range, that's like me telling you, like, hey, Mac, I'm going to bump you out of here. I'm dropping you in Iran tomorrow, and good luck. Good luck. So your chance for mortality goes through the roof after that once you leave your home range, right? You might make it, but you're going to have to be a scrappy fella. And so most of the people that get dropped out of their home range are these critters that have to move their home range. They're much more susceptible to predation, whether by people or by predators. And that's a fact. And so the additional pressure on birds can also do that. Another rando fact is birds are people that have in states where there's a multiple bird harvest where you can, harvest 2, 3, 4, 5 birds, whatever. We know that turkey hunters will go back and keep on hunting. And I think like 70% or better of the turkey hunters keep going and hunting. And we know out of all the people in all the hunting arenas, another survey done in the past, it appears that turkey hunters will expend more time than anyone else hunting. So what does that mean? You increase the likelihood of more interactions and maybe bumping birds, or maybe even bumping a bird off the nest, a hen off the nest. And once you bump her off the nest, maybe even once, she may leave her nest completely. And the chance of nest success after that goes down dramatically. And so there's all these other thoughts that come into play when we really start looking at this hard and going, okay, what can we regulate right now? And then what can we put into action at the moment as well to have benefits to increase the population, but to make sure we have enough birds there to breed and to move on and to increase the population as we improve other factors. I know it's kind of complicated, but that's just a fact.
Yeah, well, it's a relationship with between the wildlands and people, and you spoke to that earlier when you're talking about the hardwood forests, are that you can leave environments alone, but when you look at the whole of the United States, there's not much of it that people haven't influenced, whether it be tree populations or even cheatgrass, right? That's something that we always face that is not a natural thing. And it's we've had so much impact on the natural environment around us. It's really not all that natural. It's kind of our influence is there. And if you're just relying on bureaucracy to take care of it, I think we all know how fast bureaucracy moves. The thing that's going to we'll do politics on another episode with another couple bottles of bourbon.
Yes,
But
we will.
I think that's required. But like when it comes down to it, the quickest decision and the quickest impact and the most impactful things that you can do are going to be from that grassroots landowner perspective. I can change what I do on my land way faster than the government does it. And the other part of it is it like I firmly believe it with people in general is nobody likes to be told what to do. And so if you get a regulation from a government perspective, you're going to be more likely to have to play politics to get people on board, and they're going to resist you, as opposed to educating landowners and getting them to jump in voluntarily and make an impact themselves and really help out the animal populations that they're working with. And that's kind of how Turkeys Tomorrow functions, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could be my spokesman right now. That's
Hey, there we go.
exactly, dude. You hit it, man. You nailed it. I mean, we have the same mentality, and honestly, I mean, I feel pretty blessed that I've got to work with a lot of landowners across the U.S., especially here in the East, from anywhere from Michigan, Minnesota, down to Florida. And that is something that's very consistent. Is people care. If you can give them the right tools, information, to some degree, they're going to move forward with action. Some will do everything you tell them to do, and some will take a little snippet of that and make progress. And that's what we need to do. And depending on where people are, we'll meet people wherever they are in order to move them forward, because we all care and we have to come together to solve this issue. It's that important to me.
I always think it's a funny thing with people. You can take somebody, and I spoke to the politics of it, but like you could take somebody that's a passionate turkey, conservationist, wants to help out. And it's like the second that it goes into a government regulation, it's like, okay, so we're going to mandate to do this. Like, I love turkeys. I want to save turkeys. Okay, well, here's a new law that you have to do this with your land. No. And
Yep.
it's the second someone's told to do something, they will not do it. And it's just a kind of human nature thing. So hey, I had you budgeted for here for the time that we have, and I want to be respectful of that. Tell anybody listening how they can get involved with Turkeys for Tomorrow, and how to reach out to your organization from starting a chapter to joining one.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I will tell anyone to go to our webpage, turkeysfortomorrow.org. Very simple. You can go there if you want to start a chapter or find out more information about it. It's very easy to find. You just click on it. We have a short application just to get to know you, and then we're just connecting people behind the scenes. We also have a join button for opening page. You can hit the join button and become a member immediately. And then we're getting people information out every month just to kind of keep them up to speed with what we're doing. We're found on all the social media platforms, of course, everything from the professional LinkedIn to the Meta Suite, which is basically Facebook and Instagram. We're also on TikTok and YouTube. And so we're growing very quickly, and we're looking for more good folks to join our flock.
Perfect. And you also have a monster podcast with numbers that make me jealous. I need to figure out what you
Yes.
so yeah, I'll
Yes, we
provide
do.
links to all that. And which
Fantastic.
I think that speaks to the animal, and the forum that you're presenting for people that are passionate about the animal is people love turkeys. And it's one of those things like you have deer hunters, but people that are into turkeys are darn near crazy. And it's like you're
Yes.
very, very passionate about the animal, and it speaks to, you have a good following and a good audience. And so hopefully we can help you grow that here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We appreciate you guys for being a tremendous partner and really believing in us, and we believe in you. And it's good to work with people. And I told you this before, with shared values. That means a lot to us. And that's why we're glad to be here with you today.
Excellent. Well, everybody listening, go out, join Turkeys for Tomorrow. tomorrow. And
Tomorrow.
tomorrow, yes. Awesome. Jason, thank you so much. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks, Mac. Have a good one.
This concludes episode number 87 for the National Land Realty Podcast, discussing turkey conservation with Jason Lupardus, who is the Director of Business Operations and Partnerships for Turkeys for Tomorrow. You can learn more about land ownership and the buying and selling of land at nationalland.com.